History of art is a source of inspiration. For the European civilization, classical Greece is of the highest importance. Let us explore with Professor Louis Godart the origin of European aesthetics.
Thank you very much, Professor Gosset, for your invitation to speak about the birth of European civilization and art. As you know, I have dedicated to the question of the art in Europe all my life. And I must say that all starts with the Greek civilization. The ancient Greeks were always inquiring about their origins and made use of myths in order to give a coherent picture of their presence in the world. Since modern research discovered that the roots of these legends and ancient myths are buried in history, so the myth of Europe deserves as close an examination as any, handed down as it has been from the Greek tradition. According to the Greeks, Europe was the young and beautiful daughter of Agenor, king of the Phoenicians on the Syro-Palestinian coast, where today we have Lebanon. While strolling along the beach, she was admired by Zeus, king of the gods. And Zeus took the form of a bull and carried her away to the island of Crete. To the island of Crete in the center of Eastern Mediterranean. Upon reaching the town of Gortyn, Zeus reverted to his divine form and united with Europe on Mount Dicte, one of the many Cretan mountains associated with primordial cults, which left their mark on Greek mythology. From their union were born Minos, Sarpedon, and Radamanthus. The history of Eastern Mediterranean, and in particular that of the Aegean, teaches that the first true European civilization, the Minoan civilization, owes much to the civilizations of the Near East. Around 2800 BC, groups of people from northwest Anatolia landed on Crete by way of the Aegean archipelago. The island did not suffer other invasions until the arrival of the Mycenaeans Greeks, in around 1450 BC. Therefore, it was a people of Eastern origin who were responsible for the new winds blowing over Crete and for the birth of the Minoan civilization. These same people also made the history of the islands of the archipelago. In terms of territorial organization and economics, the Minoan world seems very close to civilizations of the ancient Orient at the same period. Minoan palaces, like Oriental ones, were centers where goods from a given territory were gathered, run by a sovereign surrounded by his court and held by an administration entrusted to scribes, controlling the movements inside storerooms. However, in many other ways, the minor world stands out as in an innovative culture, what I call the first European culture. Minoan art indeed represent a strong interruption of the tradition which we can see in the Orient. From 1600 BC onwards, Minoan artists began decorating the walls of ceremonial reception rooms in their palaces and private houses with frescoes. The greater part of these paintings represent scenes of court life, mainly depicting female figures, among which we may recall La Parisienne. You see here La Parisienne from the royal palace of Knossos, or the wonderful paintings adorning the rich dwellings of Terra Santorini. The Palace of Knossos was excavated by Arthur Evans, who started the excavations in March 1900, when he discovered the wall fresco with the splendid La Parisienne, this fresco here. He named the fresco La Parisienne because then in Paris, woman has exactly the same hairstyle. The introduction of the landscape constitutes one of the great themes in Minoan fresco. Flowers and animals play a vital role in all compositions, and their joint presence contributes to the creation of a fantastic and poetic atmosphere hitherto totally absent of the history of art. It was a sweet and courteous civilization, where women were held in great consideration at the heart of a refinite court, and where the love of animals, flowers, and nature was clear. Sensitivity triumphs over intellect everywhere. The colorful visions created by the painters have a unique vivacity. The gratuitous use of color is preferred to realistic tones, and instead of realistic anatomical representation, it is the expression of body movements that it privileged. In any way, a poetic world was recreated throughout extraordinarily original style, far removed from the Greek designs later depicted on vases. Other artistic expressions in the fields of ceramics, jewelers' crafts, sculpture, and the carving of precious stones in lies the profoundly innovative character of Minoan culture. These splendid vases with flowers we have seen, and representations of animals. You see here the cat in a landscape with which is very similar to the landscape of Egypt, demonstrate the love of the Minoan culture for landscape, for flowers, for animals, and let me say, for the life in general. But let's take a look to the palaces of the Minoan and Mancunian culture. These palaces were in the Near East, economic, political, administrative, and religious centers. Here you see a picture of the first palace of Malia. I had the possibility to make excavations in this palace in the beginning of the 70s of last century. All the production from the area controlled by the palace. Here we have a picture of the Palace of Knossos. All the production, I said, was sent to storerooms of the constructions. Here we have one of the many storerooms of the Palace of Knossos. And in a second phase, redistributed to the people. The leader of the palace encouraged the artistic production, and with this fantastic representation of the bull of Minos discovered by Evans Knossos, we understand how deep was the link between the Minoans and the myth of Europe. You remember what I said about the myth of Europe and Zeus who take the form of a bull to bring Europe in the island of Crete. Despite the fact that the political, economic background of Minoan culture revolved around the palace model as a Near East archetype, Aegean art represents a total break with previous or contemporary civilization of Mesopotamia, the Syrian-Palestinian coast, Anatolia, and Egypt. It stands out as the first great European civilization. Let me show you some of the pictures of Minoan palaces. Here, another picture of the second palace of Malia, the Palace of Festos on the south part of the island of Crete, with the main entrance to the rooms of the king, and a general picture of the Palace of Festos controlling the Messara plain. The civilization of the archipelago, the Cycladic civilization, is again a deeply European civilization. When you see this picture of the Cycladic statue from the 3rd millennium BC, it's fantastic to note that this picture and this statue anticipate of about 500 years Modigliani's art. The religious aspect of the Minoan civilizations is also extremely important. I said about the role of the woman in the Minoan civilization. Here you see three priestesses who are praying a goddess on the upper part of the ring, a very beautiful gold ring discovered in a tomb of the middle of the 2nd millennium BC. After the Minoans came the Mycenaeans, and the Mycenaeans were in some way the pupils of the Minoans. The Mycenaeans learned exactly the art, the administrative structure, the economy from the Minoan civilization. Let me show you a very nice picture of the Palace of Mycenae, and a picture also of the Grave Circle 1, discovered by Schliemann in 1876. In these tombs from the Grave Circle 1, he discovered also the famous Agamemnon mask, which symbolized the power of the Mycenaean kings. Let me say that this first European civilization explained to the Greeks what was important in the story. What is important in the story is the man. the man is the center of the story. And here I have to take an example to illustrate what is one of the Greek values of today Europe's. The conviction that man has the duty to rebel against injustice. This concept was born in Athens in the 5th century BC. The call to rebellion of Prometheus, chained to the rock of the mountains of the Caucasus, for being guilty to, in the eyes of Zeus, of having loved too much men, is that of ancient Greek and ancient Greece. What is telling Prometheus? I found the truth. I found justice and liberty. I raise up men who knelt before the gods for over 1,000 years, and so freed him from his oppressor. This is the cry of Helen, of Arianna, of Antigone, of Clytemnestra, of Sappho, of Menea, and also of the humble peasant of the village of Crete and Thessaly. I had the privilege to know this peasant who dared to challenge the Nazis by going to bury the heroes of the resistance. It is the eternal cry of Europe, which does not accept tyranny. The teaching passed on to the world by the classical civilization represent the first substantial amalgam which brings together the peoples of Europe. In the speeches delivered on the occasion of the inauguration of the Acropolis Museum, which were resurrected after the terrible destruction caused in 480 by the BC, of course, by the Persians, Pericles dared to throw out this starting message. May it be said of us in ages to come that we build the most beautiful and happiest city. The most beautiful and happiest city. No one before Pericles had ever thrown down such a challenge for the future. Born of the experience of war, Pericles understood that the creation of peaceful worlds capable of enduring over centuries were the only thing that could guarantee happiness. The emblem of this message of Pericles is what we find of the ceramic of the classic period, or in this superb sculpture of Athena, the goddess of intelligence. She is in front of a commemorative stone with the names, that's my interpretation, of the Greeks fallen during the Persian Wars. The goddess is saying to the Athenians, to the Greeks, to modern Europe, and to the world, never forget to respect those who contributed to construct a world of peace and beauty. As you see, I am in front of the Church of St. Peter in Rome. The Church of St. Peter in Rome is, of course, the realization of the Baroque period in the 16th, 17th century. But is connected also with what was before in St. Peter, and Roman monuments, a Roman cemetery. There is the tradition of the European art, the tradition linked always to the past, the tradition which demonstrates that we must remember what our predecessor made before us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the sharing, Professor Louis Godart. As the goddess Athena reminded us, we respect those who build a world of peace and a world of beauty. We will continue to explore the arts in the European civilization.